Hello, my dear friends from the Fire Dome, and welcome to another episode of Europa Rediviva. I've been asked by some people, some international followers as well as some Romanian followers, who is Călin Georgescu? There was this political phenomenon 2 years ago. There was a guy that came out of nowhere and won the first round of the Romanian presidential elections. And then he didn't get to win the second one because the elections were annulled. And he was subsequently not allowed to run for the runoff. The elections were held 6 months later, but he was disqualified from running. And both Romanians and foreigners have remained with this curiosity. Who is Călin Georgescu? What did he stand for? Why was he banned? What was the story with him? And actually, my answer would be that Călin Georgescu is one of these mysteries. He's one of these people/personas, characters that are very hard to put in a certain box. And most of the things you've heard about him are true in various degrees. It's very hard to put him in a specific box because he put himself in several. So it's hard to say, it's hard to discern which one is the true one. So in the 1990s, when he was young, he claimed to have been inducted into the Ministry of the Environment by the then Minister of the National Salvation Front, the first political force after the so-called Romanian Revolution. And he said in an interview that he was inducted into these higher echelons of Romanian power through the French embassy. So there was a reception at the French embassy. He was invited because he commemorated the death of a French reporter during the so-called Romanian Revolution, and this is apparently how he got into the Romanian government very early on. And then he was a technocrat. He was prepared by the Romanian state. He was sent by the Romanian state to various places. He also claimed to have studied diplomacy under Mircea Malița, who is the mentor of a large number of Romania's diplomats and sociologists. Quite a sovereigntist figure, I would say. And he finally made it to the United Nations because the Ministry of the Environment was in charge of developing Romania's agenda for sustainable development. He, being in this field, was also sent alongside the Romanian governor, central bank governor, to the Club of Rome, which had issued the famous Limits to Growth report, and it was somehow connected to the idea of sustainable development. And he coordinated the Sustainable Development Agenda for Romania, which had multiple authors, many of whom became his fierce adversaries and who contested his technical skills and his expertise, even though they were co-authors of this National Sustainable Development Agenda under his leadership. And he had been proposed for prime minister twice by President Băsescu in a technocratic capacity, and this went nowhere. So he did not go to parliament for the vote of confidence, but he was just proposed in the media. And he made it to the United Nations as a special rapporteur for some environmental issues. I'm not sure if he was UN staff or if he was Romanian staff delegated to the United Nations, because this can also be the case. And he spent a few years there. And he said, this is from an interview he did with Rainer Fülemich, the leader. He's a German lawyer, and he's the leader of this Corona Tribunals initiative to try the pharmaceutical companies and the politicians that imposed those genetic vaccines onto the population of the West. So in this interview with Rainer Fülemich, he said he was a whistleblower at the United Nations and he quit after being special rapporteur for some islands in the Pacific. I'm not sure if it was the Solomon Islands. And he said that the Americans had done, or the Marshall Islands, I think. The Americans had done nuclear testing there, and there were serious environmental consequences. And he wrote them in this very damning report, and the report was not well received because it was castigating the United States. So he quit. And then it's not very clear what he did. So he did have a tenure as a professor at the Polytechnic of Bucharest, the Pitești chapter of the Polytechnic of Bucharest, where he taught sustainable development and he taught also project management in this governance master, technical governance. He holds a PhD in soil science, so he's a pedologist. A different kind of pedo would have been required, a different kind of pedo expertise would have been required for him to stay in those globalist institutions, but unfortunately he was a pedologist, unfortunately for him. And he started making political speeches on his own, so without being designated by any political party, around 2016, or maybe even earlier. I think I got to learn about him around 2012 when he was against these corporate mining projects in Romania that drew a lot of protest. So both shale gas and cyanide gold mining in the Apuseni Mountains, the Roșia Montana case. So he was against them, and I think this is when I first heard of him. And then from 2016, slowly, he started to develop a fan base. He wrote several books. I met one of the people with whom he wrote one of the books. He assembled quite a motley crew around himself. So he kind of cast himself as some messiah figure. And all sorts of people became his supporters, but there was no clear ideological line. There was no clear reason. Okay, patriotism, something regarding agricultural development, villages, ecological development, but nothing specific. Perhaps also some inclinations towards the peasant movement of the interwar period. He did give some nods to that economic model that was proposed and that was never implemented by the National Peasant Party in the 1930s. So he did not have a clear ideology. He tried to stoke up some sort of national movement, but without a clear ideology, just some sort of big tent politics, catering to people that are environmentally minded, catering to nationalists, to religious people. He did not use his UN expertise, his technical expertise in developing some sort of implementable political plan regarding, I don't know, a better allotment of the national resources, better management, sustainable development, and so on. He went more on the mystical side with his speeches. And this is why I never thought much of him. So I saw that he had these speeches, very, motivational. If you're a religious person, they sound more like sermons. They're the kind of speeches that you would get in church. He was also invited in churches quite a lot, but nothing really concrete. Like I'm a policy guy. I want to see some policy papers. I want to see some. If you want to make campaign promises, they would be convincing to the extent that they have some sort of impact studies attached to them, and they somehow relate to the existing policy documents that the Romanian state or the local authority is governing upon. And as a consequence of this, I never thought much of his so-called program. It sounds good for some people, but it's very fuzzy, it's very hazy. Water, energy, um, water, nourishment, energy. Sure, I mean, I guess he would have done something like at least what is necessary, what is definitely necessary in Romania, is to help the peasants along the value chain all the way to the supermarket. So to create some sort of storage facilities for agricultural products, for perishable agricultural products, to create processing plants for in order to produce canned vegetables or well, all sorts of food items from these agricultural products, and then to create perhaps a national supermarket chain or something like this, because the Romanian peasants have the problem that their products cannot reach the shelves because the distribution system is all foreign owned, and the foreign supermarket chains that own the entire distribution system of the food in Romania prefer to bring. They have all sorts of agreements with these multinational corporations, multinational food corporations, and they prefer to bring from other European countries because they can do that tax-free, since it's the common market. They can bring food from their customers in other countries, and they do these deals in bulk for several countries. So Romanian farmers are cut out because there is no Romanian vending system. And the Social Democratic Party tried several times to create this, and it was always labeled populist and corrupt. It's a corrupt initiative to help the peasants sell their produce and to help the Romanians help the peasants by buying their products. So it was always laughed upon, it was always deemed corrupt and archaic, anachronistic, and so on. And it always failed. So the people that tried to create a national supermarket chain all went to prison or were criminally investigated, and through these lawfare mechanisms were forced out of power. So Romania is still in the same situation. It is beholden to these corporate food distribution systems from the West, from the Western countries. And I would have thought, like, he did not bring any specifics, but I would have thought that perhaps if he gained power, he would have arranged for such a system to benefit the food producers. Maybe, I don't know. Since he did not get into the specifics, I cannot say what he would have done. This is why I did not even support him. So he was also faring quite badly in the polls, 2-3%. And there was this other guy from AUR, this, non-sovereigntist, but still political party in Romania, who eventually was the runner-up of the rerun of the elections, George Simion, and I supported him, even though George Simion's technical expertise in whatever field, even in the field of the history of communism, in which he allegedly has a master's degree, is lacking. So, of course, Călin Georgescu had better technical expertise in various fields that are necessary to run a country. But because the polls did not give him much chance, I did not support him. I supported George Simion, who came in fourth in the first iteration of the Romanian presidential elections in 2024. And I don't know what to make about Georgescu. So ever since the elections were annulled, all sorts of claims were made against him that he was somehow supported by Russia. This is complete bullshit. His TikTok and in general his online activity was promoted heavily by the National Liberal Party, which is the party of the European group of Ursula von der Leyen. So he was promoted by the very mainstream of the mainstream of the Romanian political system. the company that ran the political campaign of this party, the National Liberal Party, the EPP affiliate, also invested a lot of money into promoting him. For some considerations, their candidate was very weak. I think their candidate came in sixth or something. And they thought that somehow by pushing this guy to get votes from Simeon, their candidate would have fared better. Anyway, so the thing is, Călin Georgescu, because first of all, because he had this career as international civil servant, and because of his mystical speeches, he seemed very presidentiable. So a lot of Romanians, once they found out about him, which is what the TikTok campaign did, they chose to vote for him because out of all the people who were running, he was the one with the most articulated discourse. By articulated, I don't mean to say that he presented facts and he was coherent in offering solutions. I mean to say that he had the right tone of voice. It was coherent with being a president, let's say. He wore suits in a nice way. He spoke in a good tone. He employed language that gave hope. So, in this regard, I would say he was the most presidentiable of them. And this is why the people voted for him. So, at the end of the day, those ballots were cast by people who went to the polls. It was not some software error, those were real votes. And the election should have gone through. He should have become president. What he would have done if he were to have been president, I have no idea. First and foremost, a coup would have started against him. One of these colored revolutions driven by the American NGOs, American funded NGOs. The stage was set for massive protests, encampments, student encampments, hysteria. We must save democracy by overturning the result of the legitimately held elections. You know the drill. It's going on everywhere. So I'm not sure he would have been able to do much. And even if he did, he was very contradictory in terms of policy directions. So he said it quite clearly that he would no longer allow Romania to be this hub for Ukraine. And perhaps he would have done something in this regard. So the president of Romania has enormous power in this respect, against what the constitution says, but it is now the president of Romania that essentially binds the country into treaties. It's no longer the government. And he would have probably done that. He would have probably stopped the aid to Ukraine, and also the use of Romania as this strategic space for Ukraine's war with Russia. But otherwise, in terms of foreign policy, Romania is extremely dependent on the United States and extremely vassalized to the United States. And he was very pleased with Trump. He was pleased with the United States. He seemed to cater to the U.S. interests as well. I don't know if it was a ruse or not. I have no idea what was serious in what he said and what was just something opportunistic to say until he wins the elections, so as not to draw the ire of the United States. Also with Israel, he seemed to be very pro Netanyahu, pro what Israel was doing in Gaza. At the same time, he seemed to draw from the ideology of the interwar period, the nationalistic ideology of the Iron Guard, which was highly anti-Semitic. So I'm not sure if he was really honest in his claims that he loves Israel so much, and that he would have invited Netanyahu, instead of arresting him, he would invite it to do a state visit if he were to have become president and so on. So I cannot really say what he stood for because he was not coherent. He seemed presidentiable in aspect, in form, but in substance, I have no idea what he stood for. And he also did not have a coherent political movement from which to infer what kind of ideology he had. There was a motley crew of supporters which supported him as a kind of guru. It was a group of people that trusted him as a person and did not bother with what type of measures and what type of orientation he would have. And so he's been indicted. He is the victim of these lawfare operations. He has all sorts of criminal cases opened against him. I think all of them are fraudulent. So I don't think he did any of the things that he was accused of, including trying a coup d'état. There was a coup d'état orchestrated against him. It was not him who orchestrated the coup d'état. But anyway, and he did receive some support from some retired former intelligence officials, but that was in terms of some logistics in his campaign. It's not like the secret services were involved on his behalf. No, the secret services are involved on the behalf of the candidates of NATO and of the European Union. He was an anti-system candidate, and perhaps he did have the support of some retired officers, but that support had no institutional backing, and at the end of the day, it was quite obvious that there was no institution of the Romanian state willing to support Călin Georgescu. So the Constitutional Court annulled his election, the Electoral Bureau annulled his candidacy altogether. Various courts, the prosecutor's office opened all of these criminal files against him. Let's see the court system. Let's see if he will really be convicted of these phony accusations or not. But either way, it's hard to say what he would have stood for. And the reason why he was disqualified was because the system thought that he might be serious in what he says. So he did pose a threat to the current track that Romania is on, which is that of being Ukraine's disposable instrument. So Romania is being instrumentalized for many foreign interests, and the strongest one is that of Ukraine. And he would have at least threatened some of them. Maybe not the one with Israel, maybe not the one with the United States, but perhaps the one with Ukraine. And that would have been already too much for the establishment to bear. So that's why the elections were annulled. This is why he was not allowed to run. This is why Diana Șoșoacă was not allowed to run. She was the first candidate to be disqualified on geopolitical grounds because of her geopolitical beliefs. And I'm pretty sure that this will continue. So in the next elections, I'm pretty sure that only the vetted candidates that are on the correct track and that will not change anything will be allowed to run. This is what I wanted to tell you. If you like what I do, like, share, subscribe. Join my Telegram channel for similar content from other creators. And until next time, take care. Bye-bye.